It's to me, it's not about keeping score with a general manager here, because I want to play this audio of Mary Kay Cabot with the midday show yesterday. She says the Browns may very well be in the market for a high-value wide receiver.
Yeah, I like McLaurin a lot too, and the Browns will always check into anything like that. They will always do that, but I don't get the sense that they're clamoring for a big, high-priced receiver this season. I think if they're going to do something like that, it's going to be next season when they also add potentially their quarterback of the future. I think this year they're probably not going to break the bank on somebody like that. But of course, when a Terry McLaurin comes along, you have to at least consider it. You have to at least look into it, weigh the pros and cons, and determine what that might look like over the next, 4 years or something like that. So I wouldn't rule it out, but I don't get the sense right now that they're looking to add a big high-priced receiver.
I look at a guy like Terry McLaurin, and this is the wrong audience to say the following things for, because you guys all know who Terry McLaurin is, and you know how good he really is. You're Ohio State fans. You know that he's been a very good wide receiver, and he's been playing in quarterback hell up until Jaden Daniels here this last year. And he's been a high-volume guy, a solid wide receiver, a guy who catches everything thrown to him. He has not been bad in the media. He has not been bad over in D.C. He's been perfect for them, and he's dealt with some serious crap over in Washington throughout up until this last season, all of his career, with the exception of this last year. There is a contract conversation they are having there. I thought before, man, I have to weigh my problems with wide receiver situations with Andrew Berry in the past. Andrew Berry is guys, he's just not good at picking them, it seems. Third round guys, you should still be able to get some value. I mean, Donovan Peoples-Jones, you had a good season with him, and then we wish him well in his future endeavors up there in Detroit and anywhere else he ends up playing. That was a 6th round guy. But I mean, you had a 3rd round guy who basically set this entire thing off in motion when he alligator armed a pass against the Houston Texans so many years ago. And here we are now, this many years later. Cedric Tillman, he is a guy who's hopefully going to develop to something, but I don't know how many people are holding their breath for him. We'll see. Big body guy. David Bell, I love David Bell coming out of college, but David Bell has a hurt knee and is always hurt. Andrew Berry has struck out when drafting wide receivers. But the trades, Jerry Jeudy, great. Amari Cooper, up until the very end, great. He's been good with trades. At 29, though, is it worth it to go get Terry McLaurin? Pay Terry McLaurin a lot of money on this football team, knowing that it's probably not going to be that many years with Terry McLaurin on this team. Do the timelines match, Anthony?
I'd say timelines don't. I go back and look at when the Browns went and got Jarvis Landry, right? And Jarvis was 26 years old. Well, they're 25 when they ended up getting him, but turned 26 that first year. So we had Jarvis through the end of his prime. He was 26, 27, 28, and 29. Then after that, he goes to New Orleans and then never to be heard from again. That 30, that sticks with you at that position more than anywhere else. And you're right, man. Everything you said about McLaurin, because people like me, Ohio State guys,
you're killing me here.
I don't follow all of them afterwards. There's just too many of them now in the NFL. He's one I kept following because I'm like, man, look at these catches. Look at how sure-handed. Look at all the stuff. He looks like the consummate pro. Why can't somebody rescue him? And then what happened last year? Seems like he was rescued. He had 13 touchdowns because he finally had a quarterback.
I remember we talked about getting him out of there when the Browns were good.
Right. Absolutely we did. Because he was getting 1,000 yards every year. And I know, there's a lot of guys that can get 1,000 yards on bad football teams. Terrell Pryor had 1,000 yards on a bad football team as a wide receiver one year. But it was different with Terry McLaurin. You're like, this guy could play anywhere. You could see him in the playoffs making big catches. And now, lo and behold, he is going to turn 30 in September. So this is like, imagine getting Jarvis Landry at 30.
Yeah.
You'd be getting him at the wrong time, right?
And he's going to cost you money.
Oh, yeah. Now
he's going to cost you money.
You'd be getting him at his most expensive.
I know, but I want him. I want him. He's a football, this is not even just living the gimmick, guys. I know you're going to look at me funny. He's like a football guy's wide receiver, man. Yeah. We pay attention to all these big name wide receiver. He's played in relative obscurity for a terrible franchise. Up until this last year, they got a lot of things fixed, clearly. But before that, he played in relative obscurity for a terrible franchise. That the pall that they cast over everything that they ever did was bigger than anything Terry McLaurin could have done for him. And now he's like this. He is known by the populace of fans in the NFL and across the country. And I'm like, now I wanted him before, and now I really want him now. Because I got because I'm thinking about it like this. I got 4 quarterbacks. I got to give them the best chance to do it. There's a wide receiver room that once you get after the first wide receiver, I think you really start to question what you have. I still don't think you question what you have with Terry McLaurin, but you're right. He turns 30 wins in mid-September. So I think right as the season's starting, he's going to turn 30 years old, and then you have to pay him money. And I could say I don't care about because he's turning 30, I can't imagine he costs that many picks. I mean, if you have all that,
it's more about the money.
If you have all that faith in Jaden Daniels, and they do over there, it's like, okay, well, you can get the picks and do what you can with Jaden Daniels. But if you're a Commanders fan, you're sitting there going, why are we taking any sort of a risk of a step back? We were just in the NFC Championship game, for crying out loud. So it makes more sense. Like in all honesty, when the dust kind of clears, I think that Terry McLaurin ends up getting his money from Washington. But damn it, I really want him. And there's so many red flags, Tone, that would tell me, Kenny's 30. Kenny, you don't know who your quarterback is. Kenny, you have been telling people here for the last umpteen months after the draft, so it's not that many months, but you've been telling people after the draft, it doesn't matter as of right now. And until they go out there and change my opinion on that, it is still, as of now, July 9th, you are taking a quarterback with your first pick in the first round in 2026. I've said all these things. And so if it's about getting a quarterback next year, which it is, it doesn't make sense. But damn it, do I want him?
Now, and what
I want him.
Yeah, what would be your expectation? Because he's obviously been awesome. Is his game
to do what Lance was talking about yesterday, which was getting the easy yards and then making them the dirty yards?
Yeah, well, okay, the easy yards are you willing to pay somebody $30 million a year? Because that's what he's looking for. I mean, Mike Evans got 24. Mike Evans' game,
damn it,
he has aged gracefully. It has been a perfect setup over there with Mike Evans. But he's 32. He's turning 32 come August.
Mike Evans should probably be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah,
by the time it's all said and
we've
done.
been talking about that a ton over the last few years with all his numbers that have added up.
Damn it, you're killing me here because everything in my good sense tells me to not do it, and I still want him so bad. Because you say $30 million and you say 30 years old.
For, yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, we can search in one hand and wish in the other. You say $30 million and 30 years old. Can I counter it? Jerry Jeudy. Cedric Tillman. Deontay Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
Jamari Thrash. DeAndre Carter.
Who's that?
Michael Woods II. David Bell. Luke Flourier.
Yeah, as of today, you've got Bill Barnwell has you ranked
Davis.
29th, I think, out of 32 teams.
I'm surprised there's a few behind us.
Or was it 31? I know it was towards the bottom. That just came out a couple of days ago.
Yeah, I know.
So McLaurin and Jeudy, if it's the Jeudy we saw, second half of the year minus the final 2 games, Jeudy looked like the guy that was drafted where he was drafted. He was incredible.
All right, guys, is there any argument you can give me? Because all my good sense says you would never do something like this in your entire life, Kenny. You just love him because you've liked his career, and maybe I do have an affinity for an Ohio State wide receiver. Okay, maybe I still am guilty as charged. Maybe there's a tinge still left in that heart.
Yeah, I like McLaurin a lot too, and the Browns will always check into anything like that. They will always do that, but I don't get the sense that they're clamoring for a big, high-priced receiver this season. I think if they're going to do something like that, it's going to be next season when they also add potentially their quarterback of the future. I think this year they're probably not going to break the bank on somebody like that. But of course, when a Terry McLaurin comes along, you have to at least consider it. You have to at least look into it, weigh the pros and cons, and determine what that might look like over the next, 4 years or something like that. So I wouldn't rule it out, but I don't get the sense right now that they're looking to add a big high-priced receiver.
But I really, really want him.
He's just
my mind is telling me no, but my body is telling me yes.
Like, there's no doubt that would get people fired up in a different way because, you talk yourself into, hey, he could elevate. Now our wide receiving core could elevate any quarterback. So now you've got explosiveness, you've got this, you got that. The brains side of you, as opposed to, just the sheer emotion, you would tell yourself, or wouldn't you? You correct me if I'm wrong, that you'd want to match up, your veteran, high-priced wide receiver, because that's exactly what McLaurin would be. You'd want to match him up with your quarterback of the future. Well, you don't know if your quarterback of the future is on this roster.
Exactly.
And the odds are, I hate to say it, but the odds are against it, right?
Yeah. Until
we actually see real football, I think most people would assume that the odds are against it. And that really isn't any shade on Shedeur Sanders, on who he is, or Dylan Gabriel. It's just players taken where those guys were taken. Odds are they're not going to be starters. The odds are against them even to be backups.
He just kind of made me realize something. I wanted to get to this at 7, but I have to look myself dead in the hairy eyeballs here. What do I really expect out of this season? Because I'm like, well, maybe we can get to 7 wins. And it's like, how much of a difference does Terry McLaurin make? Because for a team, like if this were a few years ago where we were expecting before, it's like, yeah, go out and get Terry McLaurin because there is no tomorrow and you got to cash in and you got to see if you can, approach a Super Bowl. So it would be, yeah, let's go out and get Terry McLaurin. But again, he's 30 and he's expensive and the money doesn't count for me right now. I don't care, but he'd be expensive, but I have to deal with the freight later on. And the timeline might not be the timeline because if my team is going to be good in the future, it's the same argument in so many ways we were having about Myles Garrett before. Like, are your timelines going to match where you can actually strike and be good while Myles is still good? Can you strike, which this guy isn't going to be as expensive as Myles, obviously, but can you strike and be good while Terry McLaurin's actually going to be good? And what difference does he make this year? Like you asked me how much of a difference Jerry Jeudy makes from last year. So how much of a difference does he make? What's the over under, 4.5 or 5.5? Depending on the book. Say it's 5.5. All right. I'm going to be positive.
Middle it and say 5.
Over under 5. If it's that right now with this roster as is, where you look at this, because you take a look at that wide receiver room and it's Jerry Jeudy and then the rest are question marks at best. There's a couple guys who I like, but who knows? Does he get you to 7?
Well, does
Terry McLaurin get you to 7?
Yeah, think about last year.
That doesn't still get you to the playoffs.
Think about last year, the Jets. The Jets went and got, now granted, much older, right? But they got Devontae Adams and they had Garrett Wilson, right?
Correct.
How many games did they end up winning? 5. So, and Aaron Rodgers, it was a disastrous year.
This is frustrating. I'm sorry, because now I'm just thinking like everything in my mind. Why
Jets had Breece Hall.
I love Terry McLaurin. I love Terry McLaurin. Somebody just tweeted at us, you got to go Flacco if you get McLaurin, right? Well, yeah, you got to go. I think you go Flacco regardless. By the way, Twitter reaction is brought to you by Shopman Jewelers, Cleveland's premier jewelry store. I think you go Flacco regardless to at least start the season. But I think if you go out and you get Terry McLaurin, that's actually a hell of a thought because if you go and you get Terry McLaurin, it's like, all right, Joe Flacco, we intend to start and finish the season with Joe, don't we? If you have Terry McLaurin, like that changes what you're trying to do. And you could go, well, Ken, that doesn't matter because he's 40 years old and he's a journeyman. And then I would go, then why are we getting Terry McLaurin? So my brain is, my heart really wants a guy like that because I've loved him his entire career. And I thought he was one of the most underrated players altogether in all the NFL because of who he played for. And my mind just tells me, no, this is a bad decision. You can't do this. You can't bring him in. He's a good player, but he doesn't get you where you need to go. If I can get 7 wins out of it, hey, a guy who means 2 more wins, that's a big deal when you think about it from a wide receiver. If I could talk you into 7, if everybody's healthy and get you 2 more wins, it's a big deal. I get the 7 wins. So it's still not a playoff team. So it still doesn't help me. And so now, like, this is what sucks about this year and then the process to come. Now, it may change very quickly. You see the way it's changed with Washington here. If we find a quarterback this year, say Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders ends up being a guy who takes off, I would love that to happen because then you're shopping again. then we're having fun at the store again. Because right now we're talking about necessities. We're battening down the hatches. It's toilet paper. It's necessities of what you need to sustain life while you can. Because now I got to look at how am I going to have my offensive line for the future? Like, there's a lot of pressure on Zach Zinter. I can do that all day and talk to you about that all day. What am I going to do about my secondary here? Because MJ Emerson, I think, is in a put up or shut up year all of a sudden now, where we thought he had a bright future going into last season. Denzel Ward, I think you're blessed with every year you have with him. I mean, you can go right down the line for crying out loud. Greg Newsome isn't getting a contract here. So now how are you going to replace Greg Newsome? Because he can still be solid for you in so many ways. I already mentioned the offensive line. The wide receiver core, well, you're building from the future, but you're not getting your wide receiver. And I've said this, the big high-priced wide receiver, especially if you win 7 games, you're still probably looking for a quarterback next year. So now if you win 7 games, you're using those 2 first-round picks to move up and try to go out and get your quarterback. Or you're taking a guy who you don't like as much, and then you're not getting to have your fun with your shopping. So then I'm looking for a wide receiver when? In 2027 in the first round? Which is right where, like, Jeremiah Smith would line up, right? I'm just making sure, because he's a rookie. He was a freshman this last year, so I'm okay. I got to make sure I get all my rods and cones together there. So that might be fun, but you're probably not going to be bad enough to take a guy like him. I'm just throwing it out there.
How many examples, too? Just the post 30.
Damn it, none of this makes sense.
Or
it just
roughly
doesn't make
around
sense.
30 wide receiver, big name. And, McLaurin should be a big name. I don't know if he is a big name, but his play would represent a player that's a big name. How many guys switch teams and it works out in a big way? Like Diggs was in Buffalo. He ends up going over to Houston. And, he's injured. It was Diggs, not a great year.
That's true.
But I'm just trying to think of examples. Who are the guys around the age of 30 that switch teams in the NFL?
How old Saquon Barkley? Probably a poor example. I don't know how old Saquon Barkley is. I mean, Saquon Barkley probably put himself in the Hall of Fame this last season. Because you got to win to be a running back in the NFL. You have to be a part of a great run. And I think you can make the argument by the time it's all said and done that maybe he's not. Maybe that's it. But I'm just saying he puts himself in a legendary category because they won the Super Bowl. I think it's probably there's a couple of guys throughout history, maybe like Charles Haley and a couple other guys are different positions. I'm not sure what it is with him, but like there's so many things as I say it. I think there's a lot of fans who are going, Ken, you're trying to talk yourself into something you don't even believe. And I don't believe it. 30 years old, expensive. I still don't have my quarterback. I got 2 first-round picks next year. I'm really only hurting my case for my future. And I would have to tell myself, Kenny, there's going to be other Terry McLaurins out there in the future when your team's ready to do it. So as much as I love Terry McLaurin, I mean, I'm talking myself out of it as it goes. As much as I really, really, really admire Terry McLaurin, I'm not in a position to go out and get him. It's my frustration with Andrew Berry not being able to draft wide receivers, but I know he's made good trades for wide receivers.
Yeah, it's crazy. In the NBA, we talk about LeBron and Durant were some of the big potential targets from teams. One's 36, the other's 40. In the NFL, it's, 29, 30. You start hovering around that age.
Like I've got a list of receivers over 30 and there's been a ton that have had good yardage years, but Brandon Marshall's the only one that I can see that is on he was with the Jets, and that's not the Brandon Marshall I remember.
Right.
I remember the
Broncos.
Of course. And there's guys who have aged well and have been able to fill roles. But, man, at that age, and you pay him that money, it would just seem to be the Hail Mary moves. And then I would say, are you trying to make yourself better, or are you trying to throw up whatever Hail Mary you can to protect your job? And I think that a lot of people would look at it the other way, and that's irresponsible to the franchise.
Guardians knock off the Astros 10-6 in 10 innings. Angel Martinez tie-breaking grand slam. In the top of the 10th, Guardians won 2 straight following that 10-game losing streak. The Brook Park Planning Commission approved rezoning the land intended for the Browns' new Dome Stadium. The resolution passed on Tuesday changes the 176 acres from being zoned for only industrial use as a Ford plant used to be on the site. Cavaliers doing their final practice of Summer League minicamp today in Independence. After today's workout, team heading off to Las Vegas for the start of Summer League action. The Cavs tip-off play in Vegas tomorrow against the Indiana Pacers. Want to get highlights from the Fan from earlier today? Get over to 923thefan.com or favorite 923 The Fan on the Odyssey app for all today's headline segments. Headline sports news every 20 minutes right here on 923 The Fan. From the University Hospital Sports Desk, I'm Jeff Thomas.
Listen to 92.3 The Fan on the Odyssey, iHeartRadio, and TuneIn app.
This is the time of year hope's supposed to spring eternal. Getting ready for the season. We got less than 2 weeks until camp opens up. I'm going to read these rankings to you, and I think it's going to change your mind a little bit if you're really optimistic. Bill Barnwell, he ranked the NFL's wide receiver, tight end, and running back groups for 2025, best and worst. All right, you ready for number one?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it goes the other way. So I don't know who number one is, so I have to go all the way. Damn it, I got to go all the way to the bottom here. Yeah, number one, the Philadelphia Eagles. I should have just guessed, and I probably would have got it right. Number 32 is the Tennessee Titans. Your Cleveland Browns clock in, courtesy of Bill Barnwell, ESPN. Where do you think they rank? I'm going to say I'm beat you to it. Number 29. In 2023, they ranked 12th in the NFL.
Whoa.
In 2024, they were 20th. Now they clock in at number 29. He writes, one of the few success stories for the Browns last season came at wide receiver. Once Deshaun Watson was sidelined and Amari Cooper was traded, Jerry Jeudy finally lived up to expectations as a potential number one receiver. After being inserted into the rotation by the Cooper trade, Cedric Tillman also briefly flashed as his starter upside, although he missed the final 6 games because of a concussion. Browns became the latest team to add Deontay Johnson this offseason, allowing the former Steelers, Panthers, and briefly Ravens wideout make further strides towards completing his tour of the AFC North. David Njoku wasn't able to build on his success after catch from 2023, as the oft-injured tight end fell from 7th in yards per route to 25th at his position. Franchise icon Nick Chubb moving on. Browns are going to rely on a rotation of running back Jerome Ford, who averaged 5.4 yards per carry, but that figure was buoyed by 2 long runs late in the season. Quinshot Junkins is there. He might take the lead role, but 4th-rounder Dylan Sampson could end up as the most explosive back of the trio, but still has him at 29th overall. Now, I read these yesterday, and that played into my head of going, go out and get Terry McLaurin. After we heard about that Terry McLaurin's upset about his contract, and guys, I know I'm not an Ohio State fan. It doesn't mean I hate Ohio State. You know I don't, as much as Lyman wants to tell you I do. I don't. I have picking an Ohio State wide receiver, it's usually going to work out pretty decent for you. At least it should. I know some kind of float on into whatever, but boy, I mean, you got a couple of guys who are bona fide stars in the making right there. And Terry McLaurin has dealt with quarterback hell through most of his career up until this last year with Jaden Daniels. And I'm thinking, man, if he ain't happy, I'd love to have him. Well, Kenny is going to be 30 as the season starts. Yeah, I know. If he ain't happy, I'd love to have him. Kenny, he's looking for $30 million a year. Yeah, I know, but look at our wide receiver room. Well, Kenny, and I'm talking to myself because I'm making the arguments that you were able to make to me and completely douse these flames of me wanting to go after Terry McLaurin, and probably for my own good, Tone, when it's, yeah, but he's going to be 30, he's going to want $30 million for a 30-year-old wide receiver. And if the over-under is at 5, say you just stick it. I know it's always a half, but there's some books that say 4.5, some books that say 5.5. If the over-under is at 5, then I had to ask myself this question, Tone: how much of a difference does Terry McLaurin really make? Not enough to make the playoffs. Not enough to make the play, unless Shedeur Sanders ends up being great.
Never,
or
to be fair,
any of the other guys.
To be fair, do you guys ever think a wide receiver is a difference in a team making the playoffs or not? Because
I think if they're on the cusp and you get the right one with the right quarterback,
man,
yeah. The Eagles went after A.J. Brown for a reason.
Yeah, and I mean, Tyreek Hill, obviously, when the Dolphins got him.
But you have to have the right people around those guys.
But I feel like Tyreek Hill in his prime is a one-of-one, like that can play the way he plays and change an entire team's.
You didn't feel like Amari Cooper was that for the Browns in 2023?
Oh, you could say that. Yeah, you could absolutely say that, Tone.
Man,
Joe Flacco didn't really have a lot of other people to throw to.
Okay, are you saying
except for David?
Are you saying him or his level of wide receiver, or like Amari Cooper and nobody else?
No, probably his level.
Because I always think the wide receiver is like the added luxury. Like if you bring in like McLaurin's not a top 5 wide receiver in the league or anything like that. He's just been really good.
He's really good though.
We finally got to see how good he could be on a winning team.
He was drafted by the right team. Might have been at one point a top 5 wide receiver in the league.
Yeah. I mean, that's like Garrett Wilson. I've always thought that guy had the potential to be a top wide receiver in the
I
league.
think he still has potential.
But he's just been on teams with not the right quarterback play or whatever.
I don't give up on him or Jackson Smith and Jigba or a couple of other guys that have been bopping around. I know Chris Olave, but like Michael Thomas, that was a totally different situation. I get what you're saying. I don't want to bog you down.
Marvin Harrison Jr. We could go out in all Ohio State wide receiver segment. But I guess what I'm saying here is normally you try to time these things up so that your wide receiver is not the difference maker. If you're asking that guy to be that and you're paying him as such, you'd like to time it up with having the quarterback. So it would seem a little out of sync to trade for him, whatever. I don't think you'd have to actually give up that much because it's more about paying him. So paying him, he's looking for $30 million a year. You'd like to split the difference or whatever, but $27 million a year, you're paying that guy. You'd like to have the quarterback in place. Right now, we don't. And I think it's a backwards way to look at the NFL to say you need the wide receiver to make the quarterback. You'd rather have the great quarterback to make the wide receivers, wouldn't you? And then if you do need for a playoff run to bring in a wide receiver, you trade for him at the deadline.
It's still easier to find wide receivers than it is with quarterbacks. But lay out everything that you're trying to do this year. That's why you asked this question off the air. Can you make an argument that the Browns are worse than what they were in 2024? And you look at 3 wins, you go, how could they be? Okay, well, remember, the last month of the season, weren't exactly trying to go out there and beat everybody. That plays into it a little bit. So they may very well have been if they'd not had some of the injuries that they had, and they might not have tried to change their offense halfway through the year, change their offense at all, or, do everything they did for a quarterback. This ain't going to be good for them. Maybe they would have been better than a 3-win football team. But damn it, you could look very well at this and go, hey, leave record out. Just look at what you have in your depth chart. Yeah, you can definitely say that. Because I think Quinshon Judkins is going to be good, and Dylan Sampson can be good. I don't think – who's going to be Nick Chubb in his prime? From rookie year up until the injury, Nick Chubb was great. So who's going to be Nick Chubb at the beginning of his prime and during his prime? Nobody. Can I count on Jerry Jeudy for another year? I think I can get a lot of yards out of Jerry Jeudy because I don't think I can count on anybody else. Jamari Thrash, I have hope for. That's silly to put that on him. Cedric Tillman, 3rd-round guy, really a one-route guy. Hopefully that can change. I'm not necessarily sure it will. David Njoku can be solid as long as he's healthy, and that's always a question. So I got those guys. That's still not as good as what I had last year. So play the long game here. We can go out and get Terry McLaurin, and I can make this, if everything works out all right, I can make this a 7-win team. 7-win teams usually don't have, if they're going to start with a 40-year-old quarterback this year, which I want them to, and I assume they will, and 50-50 if they will with him or Kenny Pickett right now, to be honest with you. But if they start with one of those guys who still doesn't feel like they have a great future, then if it's a 7-win team and I don't have a rookie taking over, then I'm taking a quarterback next year. And then if I'm taking a quarterback next year, then my wide receiver, unless I'm bad enough, my wide receiver might either come out of that first round of the draft or maybe in the second round of that draft, or goodness gracious, if I win 7 games some way, somehow, then I have to use those 2 first-round picks because I could still be in a situation to take a quarterback and take those 2 first-round picks, go get my quarterback, and then I got to wait until 2027 to take my wide receiver. And that might be great for people who want to take Jeremiah Smith, but I don't think they shouldn't plan on being as bad as what they would be in a position to take Jeremiah Smith in.
Does any of this matter to you, how highly thought of or how highly you think of Jerry Jeudy? Meaning, if I think Jerry Jeudy can be what's the ceiling of Jerry
I think he can be a sturdy 1,000-yard wide receiver for you, and I think he's getting paid like it, and I can be fine with all that. But if he's got 4 different quarterbacks thrown to him this year, it's going to be a challenge for Jerry.
I get that. I guess give me the comp. Because I saw some people getting carried away with how good they thought Jeudy was because of the Denver game, which was such an odd game. He was torching them on every play, and yet they never rolled coverage over. They never tried to take him out of the game. They were almost like, yeah, sure, we'll let Jerry Jeudy run up and down the field, and he killed them.
I'm trying to find a comparison. For over the top good, I can throw in the 1 year of Josh Gordon. That's over the top. Okay, that's the top of the scale. Where's the nice, meaty, higher end above the middle part of the scale that's a good, solid 1,000 yards? Is that Jarvis? Is that because you've only had a few 1,000-yard receivers? Terrell Pryor, that's a totally different conversation.
the way people were talking about him, remember, he went for 142 against New Orleans, 85 against Pittsburgh in a win, 235. I can't believe they lost that game. 235 against Denver, against Kansas City. He had 100. Now, the last two games were bizarre. They were out. The team was out. And I mean, that game against Miami, they threw to him every down. And he was like, he was dropping the ball. He was throwing temper tantrums. He was lining up offsides. The final two games were like old Jerry Jeudy. We're like Denver Broncos Jerry Jeudy again. But we excused it because you wouldn't want to. Why would you?
No.
So you excused it by saying, well, who cares? It's the last two games of the year. The season's over. If this were a playoff team, he wouldn't be doing any of this.
That just throws another thing in there. And I didn't even mention this earlier in the offseason. That's another reason why you got to start the season with Joe Flacco. You want Jerry Jeudy on the same page, don't you? If you're telling me that he was, I didn't see that. I don't remember the temper tantrums. Maybe they were there in the final couple games of the season.
It was bad body language. Well, if it was Broncos body language.
I want good Browns body language at the beginning of the year, and I want Jerry Jeudy to be his best. And so I want Joe Flacco to start the season because I know if Joe's going to find anybody, he's going to find Jerry Jeudy. He's going to be able to put it on him. He might throw an interception, but it's going to still be in his general direction most of the time. So at least you'll have that going for you. But still, it goes away from the whole thing of Terry McLaurin. And I'm not, as much as I like Terry McLaurin and would love him with the Cleveland Browns, everything about this says, Kenny, it doesn't make sense. I just want to make sure it has nothing to do with Andrew Berry's track record and wanting to put Andrew Berry in a box. Because I think if I put him in this box of not being able to draft guys, not being able to do anything but trade for guys, well, then I'm already giving up on Andrew Berry when it comes to wide receivers. But I want to know, does it make my team better? It does, but how much better and at what cost? Because if it comes at too big of a cost and we only are talking about still not making the playoffs and still ending up with like a top 12 draft pick, then did Andrew make this decision just to save his own job? Because that's not what plenty of guys have done that, but that's not what you're supposed to do. Like they decided to not take a quarterback number 2 overall this last year. And I told you, and I said it right after the draft, I can always say that Andrew Berry decided to do what was best for the franchise. So as long as he's doing what's best for the franchise, he can still get fired. But at least he's doing what he felt is best and not doing something selfish like doing something for his own job. But that decision right there with Terry McLaurin, as much as I adore McLaurin, all that evidence would tell you, and the 29th rank, which Bill Barnwell, in the end, all be all. I know he's gotten things wrong a time or two, but it's hard to argue against that. I mean, now we're just splitting hairs on the 29th ranked overall position package group.